How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back, offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world. And we'd like to tell you about them. NDC Copenhagen is happening August 27th through the 31st. Go to ndccopenhagen.com for more information.
NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. The early bird discount for NDC Porto ends July 21st. Go to ndcporto.com to register.
And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com.
Hey there. This is Jeff Fritz, the Purple Blazer guy from Microsoft, letting you in on a little secret about my friend Carl Franklin. You know, the guy who started .NET Rocks, the first podcast about .NET. In 2002, the guy who's been teaching Blazor on YouTube since 2020. Yeah, that Carl Franklin. Well, Carl's joined up with the folks from Code in a Castle to teach a week-long hands-on Blazor class at, are you ready? Get this, at a castle/villa in Tuscany. It's sort of a luxury vacation with Blazor learning built in. Carl's calling it the Blazor Master Class. You'll learn Blazor from the ground up, finishing the week with the ability to build and deploy Blazor applications. Since the training happens for only 4 hours in the morning over 6 days, you can bring your significant other, your partner with you, and you should, right? This part of Italy is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see and do, and Larry and Marco from Code in a Castle are organizing daily activities both at the castle and in the area. The castle is in the Maremma, a less touristed region of Tuscany, offering both classic Tuscan hill country as well as easy access to the Etruscan Riviera with sublime local food, wine, and olive oil around every corner. Breakfast is included every day. There will be 2 communal dinners at the castle bookending the experience, and most other meals and all activities are included. And did I mention you'll learn Blazor in person from Carl Franklin? Listen, space is limited and for very good reason. This is quality training in a beautiful setting. Go to codeinacastle.com/Blazor2023. That's BLAZOR 2023 to take advantage of this amazing opportunity to join Carl in Tuscany for an unforgettable week of La Dolce Vita while advancing your programming skills in this important new technology.
Hey, guess what? It's .NET Rocks. Again. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
And Dennis Doomen is here. We're going to be talking about all sorts of cool stuff, but Fluent assertions, I believe. But how are you, my friend?
Doing well. You know what we're doing? We're selling the house.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's time.
The house in town, not the
city
beach house. Wow.
The house we selected because it was near good schools and then built it and all that stuff. But it's been 25 years and the girls are grown and gone, and it's time to downsize a bit. And I want to spend more time on the coast.
That's good. Do you at the coast house? Did you add like the waterfall tub filling and the Japanese toilet seat and all the things I remember about your house?
Yeah, no, that'll come later. In fact, as soon as we started having the conversation about selling the house, there's already a conversation about building something new. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see those sorts of features appear.
Do you have land up on the coast house to build something small that you could actually live in?
2.5 acres. Yeah, we
good.
We have space.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Love it. You make a tree house because it's surrounded by woods, right?
Yeah. We're fully in the forest, but, I think
that'd be so cool.
I think I need something I can actually get a permit for, and that's going to be a little tricky. So,
permit schmermit.
Yeah. What is this whole safety thing? What are you thinking?
No. Yeah. All right.
Who does that?
Who does that? All right. Let's roll the crazy music because I have something cool for you for Better Know Framework.
Awesome. right, man. What do you got?
Well, I'm trying to do the math here. This is coming out on July 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And a good month and a half ago, I did a Blazer Train episode called Blazer is the New 42.
Okay.
And those of you who've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy know exactly what I'm talking about.
AKA you're old.
Yes, I'm old. Yeah, I remember when I was 42 and I thought I was the answer to everything. But apparently I was wrong.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Well, anyway, so the whole idea is that, Blazor as a component model can go anywhere now. It can not only go to, well, we know it goes to websites and browsers, but it can go to, you can use it for Maui. So it can go to iOS applications and Android applications. And if you're crazy, Tizen TVs and things like that, Mac desktop apps. But you can also build WPF and Windows Forms apps with it. And so that's the whole idea, is that, the whole promise of XAML was that it would be this ubiquitous thing, and it turned out to be completely untrue. There's at least 7 or 8 flavors of XAML.
There used to be, anyway. I mean, that's slowly cleaning that up. There were many forces at work there that caused that fragmentation.
Right. But if you think of what Microsoft's job is with XAML, it's to implement the behavior and look and feel of what XAML does consistently on every platform. And it's not there yet. I'm telling you the truth. It's even with Maui, it's not there.
Yeah, they never got to that part of the mission, but clearly that is the effort of products like Maui, is finally, after all these years.
Yeah, that is the effort. But a similar effort was done with the browser manufacturers, right? To make sure that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript performed and looked and acted the same on all of the browsers. And they've pretty much...
And that didn't work either.
Well, okay. Well, they're a lot farther along than Microsoft is with XAML. They're having to do by themselves what all these browser manufacturers had to do with the browser.
Yeah, one would argue that's an easier problem than writing if Safari code.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's a Blazer Train episode, and the link is to a GitHub repo that explains everything, gives you code that you can copy and paste and cut and paste into all these different projects.
It's cool.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, Blazer is the new 42.
Yeah, Blazer's new 42. So who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1735 we did back in 2021 with our friend Ian Cooper. We were talking about test-driven development and testing as a whole. And actually, lots of good comments on this show. It was one of those powerful conversations. And Ryan Lucking said this. He says, what to test is a strategic topic. It depends on the risk profile. What is the cost of failure to the business? That is financial, reputational, or opportunity. Is the code likely to be extended? Who will be working with this code so many months from now? When I'm writing tests, I'm thinking, how much production code can I get away with while keeping the suite fast and comprehensible? If I get it right, it hits a sweet spot where I have a high-level test API that facilitates implementing changes as things evolve. Only certain types of modules get the full treatment. Business-critical, complicated, dynamic requirements. Setting up this kind of test suite certainly takes a lot of effort, but it pays off in the long run. And I also appreciate his sort of point here that if I know this is going to continue to be worked on and likely not by me, then build out a big test framework to make it easy for other folks to handle it. But don't write tests for absolutely everything. And it's hard to argue about that. We get a little fixated on the 100% test coverage thing, which is essentially unachievable. To be strategic about thinking about your testing. I think it's smart, Ryan. Good thinking. So, Ryan, thank you so much for your comment, and a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and ever read on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And you should definitely think about following us on Mastodon. Twitter's fine, but the fun stuff and the cool kids are over on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
And send us a toot. We'll be waiting up for it. So let's bring on Dennis Doomen. He's a Microsoft MVP and principal consultant at Dutch Microsoft consultancy firm Aviva Solutions. With 26 years of experience under his belt as a software architect and lead developer, he specializes in designing full-stack enterprise solutions based on .NET, as well as providing coaching on all aspects of designing, building, documenting, deploying, and maintaining software systems in an agile world. He is the author of Fluent Assertions, an assertion library to make your unit tests look great. Also, Liquid Projections, a set of libraries for building event sourcing projections. And he's been maintaining coding guidelines for C# since 2001. Hey, Richard, that's a whole year before our podcast started.
It's before C# shipped.
Yeah. You can find Dennis on Twitter, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. Blue Sky is the one I just learned about yesterday, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome, Dennis.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here finally.
Oh, I'm looking forward to a great conversation. You've certainly got a lot of experience. You're old like us. Not quite as old, though.
Almost as old. As old. Yeah, true.
Yeah, we had that discussion before we started.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's pretty awesome to be here, and I'm looking forward to what we're being exchanging here. Yeah.
So Fluent Assertions, this is a testing framework?
Not exactly. It's not like a competition to X unit or N unit, and don't even start me talking about MS Test. No, it's basically a tiny library to make your assertions look nicer. It's basically a fluent syntax for, some variable should be equivalent to some object graph, or an action or a func in C# should throw an exception or an async exception.
Oh, that's cool.
Stuff like that. It's very simple, honestly. But for some reason, it got a lot of traction over the last 12, 13 years.
Well, it's more accurate than what we're doing now, which is naming testing methods. And what if you get those names wrong? What if the test changes of what it does, and now you got to change the name of it? It makes sense.
Although that doesn't replace good naming.
Yes. Because
honestly, I also believe that, I'm a big fan of test-driven development, and Richard was just talking about the 100%, which I completely agree. It's completely unrealistic, and it's a goal that you don't want to achieve. I would say if you actually practice test-driven development, getting 90% should be pretty trivial. Fluent Assertion itself has 97%, but that's not that difficult. It's a very simple library with a simple API. Doesn't have complicated dependencies like real-world code bases have. So it's completely obvious, and we use mutation testing and all kinds of stuff to really make it fully covered. But that's just because we want to be able to ship a new release without even doing any manual testing, which we still don't do, honestly.
He's sticking with automated testing as much as possible.
Yes.
I mean, the other part around this, and I think this was associated with what Ryan was saying, was that like those last few percentage points are also tests that are perpetually breaking. Like it's code that was growly in the first place, so it's hard to test. And so as changes are made to it, you're having a tough time with the testing, even though it's maybe functional. It's just the testing framework around it isn't happy.
True. On the other hand, I also see that the technology that we have makes it a lot easier to test things. Like, remember, like in the past when we did ASP.NET controllers, and I still see that, by the way, is people actually create a test that creates an instance of that controller class and then calls the methods, which for me is like, but wait a second, that's an implementation detail. So now, or actually it's not even now, we even had that with Owen, if you remember that from the past.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, with ASP.NET test host builder or web host builder, I always forget which one it is. You can now test your entire HTTP pipeline. Send HTTP requests to your test or to your actual code, which includes everything, even your startup class and all your DI registrations. So it becomes a lot easier to do. And if I may comment on that as well, if you look at other areas where typically people were struggling to get full test coverage, was stuff that interacts with the database. Well,
right.
I mean, we were all taught, 20 years ago, isolate the ugly stuff, create repository abstractions and stuff like that. And then people start creating tests for classes that barely do anything.
Right.
Now we can just run SQL Server or something in a Linux container, and start up you have test containers for .NET, which is a beautiful little library as well. You start SQL Server in your test suite, you run your tests, even create test data in the database. You interact with it. You even cover all your EF core or whatever ORM you prefer to use. So it becomes easier, a lot easier these days to get to that point. But it's not a goal; it's a means to an end.
Right. But yeah, it's interesting to make that point that what's making this a lot more feasible is better and better tooling.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. So have you ever run into a case where something just couldn't be tested
that couldn't be re-architected so it could be tested?
No, that's a good question. But the thing is, one of my jobs is to actually help clients with legacy code bases to make it more testable.
Right.
And that actually means that I'm looking at that code base and trying to figure out how can we make that more testable. One of the ways that I usually start with, and I didn't come up with the idea myself, Michael Feathers came up with that idea in his brilliant book. I think it's called Working Effectively with Legacy Code.
Yes.
Characteristics tests. You basically create a bunch of very ugly, unmaintainable, you don't care about that test suite that just repeats the behavior of the current system, including a database or whatever you have, which is your temporary safety net. And then you start to identify, pieces of your code base that you can refactor. Maybe you can identify things that are being reused, that shouldn't be reused. Maybe by duplicating some code, you can actually remove some cobbling in a code base. Maybe you can imply things. I mean, I know that solid is a term that can be debated about. There's a lot of people that have opinions about that. But the dependency inversion principle, I actually like it. It's a nice tool, and it's nothing more than that. A tool that helps me decouple, parts of the code base from each other. But it's a big investment. It's I use tools to create an architecture diagram of the code base, trying to understand how things are connected. I look at the dependency graph. You basically what is the word, unraveling or
I think the word you want is unfucking.
I wasn't sure you could actually say that on the.
You can say whatever you want; it'll be bleeped. But a decoupling, I think, is what you're looking for.
Yeah, but it's like you have this intertwined spaghetti code base, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to take every individual string, detangle. That's the word I was looking for. Of course, named to the Disney movie Tangled.
Who knew? Who knew Disney was into software development?
Yeah, I'm Dutch. You can hear that from my accent. But for us, a lot of English terms, titles of books, of series, and movies, it's just an English term until you start to literally translate it in your brain, and then you think, that's really stupid. Yeah. Even Star Wars is kind of stupid in that sense.
By the way, I don't remember if we were talking about frickin' Dahl before we started and Bitterballing, but I think it was before we started recording. But, I spend a little time ragging on that. But, there is no better cheese than Edam.
Edam, yes.
Edam, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Honestly, Dutch people are actually the worst in all the cultural things. They don't walk on wooden shoes. They don't know where all the fancy places in the Netherlands are. You need to be an expat to actually, visit all these places. Okay, we're derailing, I guess. Yeah.
Were we talking about Fluent Assertions?
I think we were. We were trying to get there.
It might have just been me. I don't know.
No.
So it started 13 years ago, and I just checked. It has 251 million downloads on NuGet.
Boom.
Honestly, I have no clue. I have no clue why people are using it. Everybody I go to conferences these days. I speak about completely different topics, architecture, and then people say, "Oh, you're the guy that created Fluent Assertions. Thank you for that. You made my life, much better." Like, oh, okay. I still don't know how to respond to that.
Yeah. I think, thank you is the only thing you can really say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Basically, I hope you enjoy it. If you have feedback, let me know what we can do about it. Create an issue.
Glad you like it, right? That's great. That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, indeed.
So is Fluent Assertions something that you use in your test code as well, or is it just on attributes that for testing methods? How exactly do you use it?
Oh no, it's actually an extension method which is called shoot, as you can expect.
Okay.
And that basically exposes a bunch of methods like should be true, should be empty, should contain, stuff like that.
So extension methods for all basic types.
Basically, yeah. Collections, and there's even support for dataset, which was a mistake because a contributor
should be
proposed
not
that.
used.
No, and we were we were afraid to say
no.
Yes, indeed. No, but that's essentially what it is. It's just surprising how much time you have to spend on maintaining a code base like that. That's popular. Like people always come up with niche IDs. You have to be, backwards compatible. And by the way, I just want to give some kudos to my the person that spent the last 3 years maintaining as well, Jonas Nierup. But we
Okay.
work together, and we try to keep the whole API consistent. We try to support all the frameworks, make sure the code itself is tested and is actually example code. We practice test-driven development ourselves.
Nice.
At NDC Oslo, I even talked about like all the little tools and practices that we use to maintain that library, which to my own surprise was like, there's actually quite a lot we do to make it great. It's almost like a real project.
So do you have
Almost like.
It's a real project.
So getting back to the extension method thing, you have an extension method for objects, so it just
Yes.
works everywhere. So
Yes.
even your own models, you could say .should, return
You can do actually
1 or-
should be equivalent to,
Yeah.
and then you can pass in another object.
Nice.
And what it will do, it will treat that object as a truth. So you can also pass an anonymous object, anonymous type.
Sure.
Excellent. It's actually, there's a design principle behind that, because I believe that in your unit test or automated test, every test should have one purpose. So if you have some kind of object, like subject under test, that has a bunch of properties, but for that particular test, you only care about, for example, 2 properties,
Right.
then you can say should be equivalent to, create an anonymous type, only mention the 2 properties, and those will be compared.
That's great.
The rest will be ignored.
That's great.
Which I use a lot for HTTP-based testing, for example.
Yeah. I remember before I discovered tricks like that, having to implement iClonable, to make copies of the object just to test and to see, if this is that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like it's also recursive, so it's a bit too smart. It started with a simple thing, but this be equivalent to does a kind of recursive analysis. It tries to understand how to treat records and tuples and dictionaries. If the dictionary contains the same keys and the values in those dictionaries are equivalent, it will also satisfy the assertion, and you can completely tweak that. Well, that's one of the features that kind of exploded and became too powerful, to be honest.
Well, but I noticed you didn't say it uses AI, because
Not yet.
AI is the new hi-fi of the 50s.
Well, actually, you can ask ChatGPT to rewrite your test using Fluent Assertions, and we'll do that for you.
Well, that's
Oh, wow.
ChatGPT, but yeah. I just hate it. I was listening to the radio this morning, and there was some ad for some technology thing, and they're saying, now with AI, it's like,
Everything is AI now.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah, everybody's
I know.
trying to. It's one big marketing thing.
it's totally marketing thing.
They went down to the home the home maintenance center, and they bought themselves a spray can of AI, and they're squirting on everything. There you go. I just draw out the letters.
Home
Hey, look, it's
Depot.
got AI on it.
Lowe's, Menards, all that.
Yeah, true.
Pick
Yeah.
one. It's kind of astonishing. Like I was just poking around the GitHub repository. I realized like you guys have been on GitHub since 2010. That's before it was cool.
I think we jumped from Codeplex to GitHub just in time.
Oh, I see.
Codeplex. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did even. I mean, my Jonas didn't join by then, but I was doing this alone. But I think it started as some kind of internal project. Then I moved it to Codeplex, which was kind of difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Because if people want to contribute, they had to deliver a patch file. That didn't work.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I remember there was an option to convert, because it was basically Team Foundation service under the hood, right?
Right.
And they built some kind of feature that you can send an email to the Codeplex team to say, can you convert this Git? That was basically when I started doing Git. Yeah, and then GitHub came, and then everything changed. Pull request, and it didn't. Yeah, and now we barely keep up with all the pull request reviews that we get, and the issue reports, and the feature requests, and
Right.
that's the flip side of being successful. I'm not sure. I don't want to use the word successful, but
No, I think that's fairly.
51 million downloads is pretty much qualifying you to be successful.
Yeah.
sure.
And still, like you look at the stats on the project, you go, this is a healthy open source project. Like regular contributions, lots of people working on it, lots of issues. Like this is a busy project. And your pull requests are pretty under control, friend. At this particular moment, there are 8. And they have real conversations attached to them. This is not just blind code going in.
Yeah, true. It's costing me a lot of time.
Yeah.
Jonas as well. Unfortunately, Jonas spends a bit more time on it. I also do a lot of talks and stuff around that, which consumes some time about that. But yeah, it's I'm very happy with it.
Good job,
It's
Jonas.
just that, yeah. Thank you, Jonas. There's some kudos for this guy. It's funny because I actually met him at the NDC for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow.
Like literally.
Wow.
collaborated remotely for
3 years, 4 years.
3 years, 4 years, and now you're finally face to face. What, NDC Oslo?
Yeah, indeed. It's like, yeah, indeed. That was really interesting.
That's cool.
It was a great experience to finally meet the guy. And this was not the only. There was another project from Jeremy Miller on Martin, and he also met his major contributor for the first time in person. Actually, I met Jeremy for the first time, which was also nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these folks that you've communicated with for years and years, and you just don't actually get this whole in person thing. We didn't do it for a couple of years, and now we're kind of like, hey, it's a feature.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. We could spend a lot of time just digging through Fluent, but I think you hit the key points here, and it does. I like this whole like detect a test framework and work with it kind of mindset to say, okay, well, we're using NUnit, so do it like this.
And people ask me sometimes, like, why is it successful? Honestly, I don't know. What is the key thing? Because there's a lot of open source developers in the world that want to contribute, and sometimes like, what makes it successful? I don't know. Is the catchy name? Probably not. But yeah, we do care about the quality of the code. We do try to, as you said, contribute, have decent discussions on GitHub, like try to understand what people try to do.
Yeah.
We have a Slack as well. Obviously, it's designed for extensibility. But it's like a real project. You make mistakes, you introduce technical depths, you accept pull requests that in retrospect we shouldn't have accepted that. We'll try to fix that in the next major release. But yeah, we do semantic versioning, which means you have to be very careful. It's not just that it has to be compatible on the source code level, but there's also quite a lot of, actually, that's what I discovered in the hard way. There's a lot of people that build their own NuGet packages that depend on this as extensions, and then you change the signature of a method, like the return type of a method. Like, who cares? That should be, it just compiles. And then somebody says, oh, yeah, but now I have this binary compatibility issue, missing method exception, stuff that makes it a bit more harder for us.
Yeah. It's, and I get the sense you made this because you had problems you were trying to solve, and then it became its own set of problems, effectively. Like,
I don't see it like that. I mean, of course, I'm proud, and I use it myself every day. And I do a lot of consultancy gigs, and then you come into a client, and it turns out a lot of people are already using it, and they know you, and
Yeah.
The only thing is, it starts to define you, like, okay, this is Mr. Fluent Assertions.
Yeah, you all you do is testing. You don't do anything else, right?
No. Yeah, exactly. But it does give me some credits. I even had at my client that people were. I was working for that client for a couple of years, and people were actually applying for a job because they knew that I was there. Like, okay,
right.
I don't want to spoil your. I'm not that good, actually.
Nobody is.
Well, you're humble. That's for sure.
That it's reasonable. Are you seeing a lot of folks? I mean, they're taking TDD seriously, like. It's because it seems like Fluent is exactly what you want in this idea of I can describe the test before I write the code. And as the code gets developed, the test will pass.
A lot of people want to do it.
Right.
And not a lot of people, I would say 30% of the people that I meet actually do it, or they're trying to. Not necessarily with Fluent Assertion, because that's just a tiny ingredient of it.
Right.
But a lot of them are struggling with that. And this is also one of the many talks that I do at conferences, because I see them struggling, and I've tried to understand why they're struggling with that. And quite often it's the mistakes I made myself, like testing at too small scope, like assuming every class is its own unit. Well, for me, that's wrong. That's almost always wrong. And that is already a change in mindset. And, you need to actually understand the internal boundaries of your system, of your code base, and try to align the unit of your unit test with those boundaries, which means that you might actually testing a couple of different classes together. And the example that I use for that is that this single method in Fluent Assertion, be equivalent to, it's a single method. But if you're going to look at the code base behind that, that's like 20, 30 different classes with strategy pattern implementation, stuff like that. And then I show people the UML diagram, assuming people still can read UML, something that we learned in the past, 30 years ago. And I show them the diagram, and then I'm asking them like, okay, this is the method that you use on the front. I'm using my hands, which obviously doesn't work here. But
he's waving them wildly.
Yeah. You use the be equivalent to method. That is the actual thing that you're working with. That is your contract. Everything underneath is essentially an implementation detail. Because 12 years ago, I had one class. I think it was called equivalency validator, or maybe even, I don't know, extensions or something like that. Over the years, I wrote like tons of tests. I think there's like a 2,000 different unit tests against this be equivalent to method. I never started testing the individual classes. Mm-hmm. I always test the whole thing as a unit because all of them are implementation details. Because of that, I managed to refactor things over the years. And that's, at least that's what I believe, what the original Gang of Four meant with, design patterns. It's a way to refactor your code base, give it more structure, make it easier for people to understand that structure. And I have a bunch of these examples that I do in my talk to try to make people aware that the unit is quite often much more than that single class, except if that class is designed to be reusable.
Right.
Yeah. And that is one of the key ingredients, if I may, that I think that makes a big difference if you're trying to practice unit testing and test-driven development.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, that's the challenge. And it's interesting to see, you've got this recursive effect going on, Dennis, where you're using those testing principles on your testing framework.
Yeah, true.
And making all of those mistakes along the way. I mean, one of the parts about this is you've been doing it long enough that you started before NuGet. Like, you didn't have all the help that is around now. So you've sort of grown up into that as well.
True.
And just it's interesting to see that you were just learning along with the rest of us about all of these problems and trying to get to, I think we're in a better place. I'm pretty sure we're in a better place.
No, we're in a better place. Absolutely. If I compare that, I mean, indeed, I remember that we didn't have NuGet. I remember that we didn't have .NET Standard or .NET Core. We didn't have multi-targeting. I remember that Claire Novotny helped me a lot, like implementing like a bait and click implementation, so that we can support multiple frameworks and dynamically load certain parts of Fluent Assertions based on the framework you're targeting. I remember there was something called .NET 5, which has nothing to do with there's no .NET Core 5. Was that .NET Core 5? I don't even remember anymore.
No, it was just called .NET by then.
It's just called 5. Yeah, they got rid of the core.
Yeah, and there was like this moniker called .NET 5, if I remember correctly. A couple of years ago, way before .NET Core, they were trying to come up with some new framework standards.
Oh, maybe it was proposed Microsoft.NET framework.
Something like that.
Because it's currently, there is no 5 for that.
No, it wasn't even called .NET 5. Oh man, it's a dark age time thing where everything became very difficult with .NET. I think when .NET was kind of losing its popularity for a while. But yeah, I mean, now multi-targeting is just a matter of specifying the targets you want to target, use some if def statements here and there, and it just works. It's so much easier. .NET Standard also enabled a lot of things we couldn't do in the past.
Yeah.
But also Markdown, being able to build your own documentation websites with Jekyll, have GitHub host them.
I love Markdown.
Yeah. Good IDEs that help editing a lot easier. I think we're in a great world with .NET, actually.
It's better.
Definitely.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And Dennis, I'm going to interrupt for one moment for this very important message.
Or two.
And we're back. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Hey.
And you're listening to .NET Rocks. We're here with our friend Dennis Doomen. We're talking a bit about Fluent Assertions. Do we need to talk about liquid projections? I like these names.
I think we should. I think we should sort of start at the beginning about event sourcing and what it's used for. We haven't really gone into that. So maybe we should define that and CQRS and then why we need projections and what they are.
Yeah. So that's a question, I assume, right? Yeah.
Yeah, let's start there.
Event sourcing is an architecture style. It's not an architecture, but it's just a style that you can use to store. Essentially, it means you store the state of your domain in the form of a series of events.
Yeah.
So instead of storing, creating a customer table and you have a customer object in .NET and you just use an ORM or something like that, like Anti-Framework or an Hibernate if you're old enough, you store that into a table. you're actually storing things that happened in the domain.
Right. The changes.
The changes, but not just the changes, but also you try to capture the intent, like what happened functionally in the system. I think the textbook example of that is that when you change the address of a client or something like that, is that because there was a mistake in the address, or was that because the client moved to a different place?
Right.
I mean, even the number, the number of the street. I mean, if you, I know some pretty big streets in the U.S., and if you move from, I don't know, what is the big street with all the bars in Los Angeles? I always forget. But if you move from number 15 to 2000, is that a mistake? Or did you actually move to a different place?
Right.
Right.
A canonical example also is in finance, right? Where you can't just like change the amount that you charge somebody if you overcharge them. You have to put in how much you charge them, and then you have to add an event or a projection or something that says, oh, we had to correct for this, and now the current value is this, so that you always have a record of how the state has mutated, and hopefully you be able to undo that or go back in time and look to see what the state was at a certain time.
That is one of the strengths of event sourcing, is that you can actually do that. You can also replay history. You can actually look at the state of the domain at a particular point in time, which is why it's coming from the financial world.
And so projections comes up within the context of CQRS usually, right? Command Query Responsibility Segregation, where you want to transform the state from maybe what your application uses to something else. The event needs to be projected into some other kind of shape, so that it's easier to do something that you want to do, like query.
Correct, because the challenge with events, of course, if you only store events, you cannot do a query like, give me all the open orders which total value is bigger than 100K or something, all the clients with orders that have over $100,000, because that information is not available. You can only say, give me a particular customer if that's the entity that you have. So if you want to be able to do queries across all these entities in all kinds of different structures, you need to take those events and project, as you said, into a format that is more optimized for querying. And that can be an HTTP API that you use in the UI. You can even project it into a JSON or XML or HTML page that is already pre-rendered. So by the time the request comes in, which is very powerful.
Yeah.
That is usually a source of a lot of complexity. To build those projections, to think about, okay, should they be synchronous with the domain? If you click on the save button from a web page and you do a query, should it then be consistent, or is it acceptable that these things build in the background? They're also a big problem if you upgrade your version of the code base to a new version, then you need to deal with the schema changes or something like that. You have to reproject things. And if there's millions of events in your event store, as they used to call that, that can take a while. So Liquid Projections is just another tiny library that I built to make it easier to build those the projection code, basically what we call projectors. Nothing more than that. It's just a bunch of building blocks, not even a framework. I don't like frameworks. I like to build small building blocks that you can mix and match. It does require you to understand those building blocks a bit better, and I have some documentation on the website about that. And nothing more than that. Doesn't even take me a lot of time to maintain, actually.
Does it also use a Fluent syntax?
It does use Fluent APIs. Yes. Yeah, indeed.
I sense a pattern here.
Yes. Yeah. It becomes cheesy. I also built something called, it's called Fluid Caching was another little library I created. So Liquid Projections, Fluid Caching, Fluent Assertions. And then I probably used Google to find other synonyms for things that can,
So you could do a Fluent library for F# and call it F-Fluent.
Jeez.
Well, some people actually ask me,
man. That's pretty good. I love F#. Don't email me.
Some people actually hate this whole Fluent API, but I like it.
I love it.
I found, there's another library called Flurl or something for building Fluent HTTP requests or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I just was poking around NuGet and saw 250 million downloads of Fluent Assertions and thought, that's a big number.
Okay, there's no question about it. You're successful here.
Yeah.
Well, ask my wife. She said, but why can't you just earn, 1 cent per download or something?
That's true. Yeah.
I said, doesn't work like that. So what do you get out of it? I don't know.
The admiration of your fans.
Yeah, something like that.
Absolutely. You get to be on .NET Rocks.
Yeah, indeed. Which is worth it already. 12 years of investment.
Both listeners appreciate it.
Yeah, that and €5 will get you a latte.
Yeah, that's a topic on itself, funding and open source development.
We were just talking about that last week.
Yeah. I mean, it's a recurring topic on the show lately, especially because I see you have a Patreon and things like, is any of that helping?
No.
Right.
The only thing that's helping is GitHub sponsoring.
Yeah.
The GitHub sponsor. I did see there's a few GitHub sponsors.
Yeah.
It's not, seems to be the most direct.
That's usually because it also supports. Well, the thing is with funding is that a lot of companies don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like somebody can pull their credit card and pay for it. They have to go through the, I don't know, what's the name of this department, procurement or something like that.
Yes, finance, right? Yeah.
Yeah, finance, and it becomes very hard. And I was talking about this with Matthias Koch, who built another library called Nuke, which is a C# build script library.
Mm-hmm.
He was struggling with the same thing. It's difficult. It's difficult. And again, I'm not doing it for the money.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a day job, and but it does help a little bit with getting speaking gigs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But it is for better or worse a labor of passion because it is in the business itself. And I don't know that it would be better. Like the other conversation we're having is, okay, now I'm productizing this because there's certain customers out there that want to pay me, but only if it's actually got a commercial component to it. I don't know that Fluent Assertions falls into that category.
Can't think of anything. I mean, what would you offer? Like somebody has to pay for a unit testing library? Like, how would you even do that?
For support? Like, does that even make sense?
Yeah, that's what I do. I do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually use GitHub sponsors and pay a certain amount of money, and you get like some time from me to help you make your test better. But that hasn't really helped.
No.
It's not like Identity Server, where you actually say this is a crucial part of your product, and then people are willing to pay for it because it solves a production issue.
Yeah, it's a chunk of code they're running in production, and they want certain things from that. And the funny part is in last week's show, we were literally describing, and I said, hey, yeah, this makes sense when it's a CMS, which when we were talking to Sean Walker about it, that you can turn it into a commercial product, but there's going to be these internal libraries that it doesn't make sense for. And here we are having a conversation with you about an internal library that it doesn't make sense for.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, it has to come from people that appreciate it, or they feel like it really helped them in a certain way and they're willing to do a one-time thing or something like that. I mean, look at yourself. Like, how often do you contribute or do you sponsor other libraries?
Yeah.
I mean, I should actually pay for ActionUnit and all these libraries that make my life, that makes me a better developer, help my clients even.
Yeah,
Doesn't work.
One thing that just occurred to me is that, in the music business of the past, because I don't think it's really relevant anymore, you used to bars and performance establishments used to pay, or they still do, ASCAP and BMI to collect royalties for artists on their behalf. And they would just, how many hours a week do you have? What jukebox stations do you blah, 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 this and that. All right. We estimate you're going to pay like, $1,000 a year or something like that. And then the goal of ASCAP and BMI then is to get artists to register with them and then distribute royalties accordingly. But it's become a joke with live streaming and all that stuff. But there is a similar idea that, GitHub or one of these places that we've been talking about, some establishment or some nonprofit agency could essentially say, if you use open source, you should become a member and pay a due. And then those dues are collected and then distributed to open source projects based on the number of downloads they get, whatever that is.
I would embrace that.
Right. And if there was such a thing, I would do that as well. I would become a member of that organization, because then it's not like I'm not nickel and diming myself for this project and that project and this project and that project. I'm saying, look, here's $100 a month or whatever it is that I'm giving to this membership. And then that is going to support the open source community. I like that. Somebody prove me wrong.
I like that too. Actually, in the Netherlands, you actually still have to pay for music like that. If you have a bar, sports canteen, you actually have to pay.
Well, I know.
Even if you use Spotify.
Yeah, I know Spotify Business costs like $50 a month per room that it's in. And I have people who, friends of mine that own restaurants, that say it's worth it because they can just put on what they want, but that's, that's not ASCAP and BMI anymore. That's Spotify who's, distributing micro pennies to artists. Yeah. It's kind of broken.
Yeah. It's just a question of, is it usable money? Does it make a difference?
That's right. Yeah.
I feel this conversation keep coming up. I'm the guy who is good at talking to the CFO, and I feel it's like, is there a construct here? I know it's becoming more common in bigger companies to have like a giving fund for charities, where the company says, "Hey, we'll match dollar for dollar what you contribute to your favorite charity," that kind of thing. Like, should we be pushing on a construct for any organization that's development that says, let us know what open source libraries you're using and you value, you put in your votes, and we have a pool. We're going to spend $1,000 a month distributed across the open source projects that you think are the most important for us.
Right. And let somebody else deal with the math.
Well, that's it. You do that with a piece of software. Like that all of the developers that are working inside of an organization, we've got to do a bill of materials for our software anyway, right? So we already know what libraries we're using. Let's see what show up the most. Then throw in some voting, like tell me what your feel of the value of this is, how important it is, and so forth. And from that, we just distribute the money, and you simply assign a budget item to that says, hey, we depend on a bunch of these things, so we're going to spend X many dollars a month and distribute from there. And that makes us a good citizen.
I think companies are more willing to embrace something like that can be a line item in the budget, rather than, having developers come to them and say, hey, I need $5 for this, $10 for this, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. The dev doesn't want to do it because they don't like talking to finance.
Right.
Finance doesn't like these small ticket items because it's a pain in the butt.
If
it's a single monthly line item and there's a mechanism for doing distribution, done like dinner.
I like that.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I feel guilty that I haven't pushed for that at my clients, even my own employer, because it's not that hard to explain that. I mean, you spend just one developer spends one day of working is already much more than the $1,000 that you just mentioned.
Exactly.
The thing it can't do is evolve into a business that's for profit. Like, it has to be very, very stripped down, and it obviously needs oversight, but it can't turn into a for-profit business, because then it'll just eat up everything, and then the developers won't get anything.
Well, some people make that business. I know this Vue.js project at some point on Patreon. I think there was like $15,000 a month of like that person can actually make it their job to do that,
right?
Which is not my goal, because I actually love talking to clients, but I completely buy into what you're saying. And I've just decided I should push a little bit harder, because it's not that complicated.
Yeah, this sounds like a project we could build. It's a little bit of software,
open source.
It's certainly a mindset. But the whole thing here is to lower the barrier to doing the right thing.
I think GitHub has a responsibility there as well, and I think they're also trying to make it easier for companies to sponsor projects.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like right now, GitHub sponsorship means going to the individual project and assigning the money. Like, there really needs to be the company level viewpoint. And if your company's functioning through GitHub with private repositories or public ones, like if that's where your source code flows through anyway, GitHub has all the data you need.
Right.
It can produce that bill of materials for you, and it can tell you, here's the dependencies you're taking. Like,
and here's your suggested monthly donation, or whatever it is. Whatever you call it.
Let's go get Thomas Demke and pin him to the wall.
I think that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Let's do that. I don't know who that is, but
the current CEO of GitHub. So
I should have known that.
Well, you should at least send him a link to this episode. Yeah.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we can invite him on. He's been on my radar as someone to invite on just to talk
there
about
you go.
Sort of the state of GitHub.
So let him talk extemporaneously for a while, and then we'll nail him.
Yeah, they'll pin him down. Yeah. Now he's not coming on.
Now he's not coming.
Look what you did.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, we're just trying to make it a better place for developers all around. That's all.
Yeah. Well, and it's the thing is like we're thinking through each level's problems, right? Like it is very reasonable for a development organization to recognize the certain amount of money that we're saving because we use these libraries.
Yeah.
Let's assign a portion of that to be distributed, but make it easy for me to do that.
Yep.
And then you want to support the right things. You want your developers to feel great that we're supporting the right things. So you want that involved in the process, but it should be simple.
Yeah.
Seems you guys just solved the whole problem for us.
Well, now somebody's got to do it. Ideas are cheap.
Yeah. Ideas cheap. Execution is a pain in the butt.
Right.
As always.
C# coding guidelines. Why did you do this? What is wrong with you?
And what does your wife think about it?
Yeah.
She doesn't know. It's my secret. The secret that I just shared.
You must have gotten enamored of C# right at the beginning then. Like the original announcement in 2000. Like when did you encounter C# the first time?
I think in 2000 or end of 1999. I was doing C++ mostly with, I think it was called MFC.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with a company that had C++ guidelines based on Strausstrup, industrial strength C++ or something like that. It goes really... And initially it was really annoying, obnoxious set of rules, like you should not have more than 100 lines. Now we have tools for that. These days, this is just a bunch of development guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Some conventions and a lot of stuff you can cover with editor configs, with what else? Roslyn, with I use a lot of JetBrains tooling, so with ReSharper and Writer, you can get this stuff for them. But it's mostly a set of guidelines. And for me, they're kind of obvious. Apparently, there's still a market for it because people still fork the repository or print out this cheat sheet, which is a one-page PDF that you can put on people's desks, like when we're still working at the office.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's more guidelines like that people don't start to overuse, I don't know, the new pattern matching or make switch statements from everything instead of thinking about object-oriented design. Stuff like that to just remind people about that every practice, every principle can be misused and overused.
Sure.
And I'm trying to find some balance, like how you can do that. Nothing special. Yeah.
Yeah. And then every rule should be broken once in a while, just done coherently. Like there's a reason why we broke this rule.
That's why. Yeah. And that's why it's called a guideline, not a rule.
Yeah. I always worry when people print that stuff out and hand it to people. It's like, this is gospel. You must follow this or you have failed.
I know. I used to be like that, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. But yeah, at some point, I guess you grow up and you start to understand the pros and cons and when things apply.
Well, just acknowledge that there's more than one way to be successful. That there's no absolutes for any of this. If there was one right way, we'd be doing it. And there isn't.
There isn't. True. That's why it's a GitHub repo. And I even recommend people to clone, fork the repo, create their own internal, whatever they want to call it, and use that as a starting point.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great idea. But the main thing here is like, why does this guideline exist? Here are the risks when you don't follow it. But they're only risks, right? Like
that's what it is.
They're nothing certain. It's like when these things get too long, they get harder to maintain. Like you're entangling, different methods together. Like there's all the mistakes that we make as developers, and the guidelines try and steer us away from that.
And you can have opinions about that. You can disagree with it. That's totally fine. But I recently learned, and I didn't realize that myself because we're getting older and been in the .NET world for 20 years. There's an entire group of people that just graduated or have 2-3 years of experience, and they may benefit from some of these guidelines because they don't even think about it. They just try to make the code work. And probably some senior developer will slap them in the face with my guidelines. I don't know. At least make them think about this kind of stuff.
Right.
Don't follow it blindly. Don't be dogmatic about anything. Except that you should use Fluent Assertions, of course.
Yes. Did we mention?
But yeah. I don't know if you heard. I don't know. But also that, don't be dogmatic about it. This is why we do it this way. And it's hard when you're a new developer to understand the consequences of the code you write 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Because you haven't had that experience yet.
And again, tooling has become better. Now we have Roslyn analyzers that help you fall into. It doesn't solve the problems, doesn't solve your design issues, but they can help. We have SonarCube that may, tell you that your method is too long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a risk that people that just blindly start to stupidly refactor things and not make it better.
Mm-hmm.
But it should be a trigger. I hope it's a trigger. People think about this or have a conversation with other developers like, you know what, my method is pretty big. I can, of course, make all these very small methods. It's not going to make it better.
Right.
Are there different ways of how I can approach that? I hope that this will trigger things.
It's almost a stimulus for conversation. It's like, why is my method getting this large? Am I entangling two different things, or is it just a big method?
Could be.
And you get another pair of eyes involved. Like, look at this. Why am I pressing up against this limit? Am I approaching this wrong, or is it the right thing to do? Refactoring it just to make it shorter when it still does all the same thing is questionable. Right? It's really I think the main issue here is, am I not sticking with a single function here? I'm making the do all the stuff method.
Well, that's why a lot of people are so, let's say, negative about clean code, because, people start to follow these books and stuff like that blindly without understanding what's behind that.
Yeah.
And that's with everything. I mean, you can configure SonarQube in a certain way that your pull request will be rejected. But the whole point is you need to think by yourself, or at least have that conversation, as you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think you learn to think by yourself by having those conversations. You're hoping that the tools will give you indicators of when to have those conversations, so that you're not always running back all the time.
Yeah.
That you just do it when it's needed. No, I really appreciate that. It's just astonishing to me to do anything for 20 years. Oh, wait, how long will we make this bloody podcast?
Oh my God.
I think you're the same species, Dennis. You get involved in things and you just don't stop.
Yeah, we have that disease.
It's called passion.
Yeah.
It's called passion.
Okay, we'll call it that. It might be a kind of insanity too.
Yeah, but I think, if understood correctly, sanity means you're doing the same thing all over and over again and expect different behavior.
That is one kind of insanity.
That is.
I actually see change of behavior.
Yeah.
I see people ignoring me. I see people throwing my guidelines in the trash can.
Let's leave your wife out of this, because she just has your best interest in mind,
Yes. No, but that's why we do these things, right? I mean, you're doing a podcast to share experiences, to provide people with a different insight. I do the same thing with my blogs, with my presenting on conference. It's never the truth. It's just a mindset, or maybe a different perspective.
Just
of
a
things.
view. Yeah.
Right.
Just a view.
Dennis, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and please do come back again.
Love to. Thank you very much.
All right. Awesome. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a